Good morning, Austin Oaks Church. How's everyone doing today? It's good to be with you. I'm excited for this morning's Devo. It's one it's always been one that's been really effective for me in understanding God's heart for the church in many ways. Somebody let me know who's out there. Somebody give me some thumbs ups and tell me what you're having for breakfast today, or what you've had for breakfast and what that looks like. And I don't know. I've never been a breakfast person, so I don't eat breakfast. Like I would say, like 99% of the time, I don't eat breakfast. I've never been able to do it ever since I was a kid. So my breakfast is coffee, like every day of my life. So tell me, what are you all having for breakfast, or what have you had for breakfast so far? I'm curious to know, because I think that most people have these really hearty breakfasts. Hey, Jenny, how are you? I think it is good for you, and I've always tried coffee. Jenny, you and I are on the same page, yeah. So I think it is important, from what I understand, that people have leftover pizza. Melanie, does count for breakfast. I'm not sure that's probably what the doctor would order, but hey, it's food. I know I always heard, and most people hear, that it's such an important meal. So anyway, hey, I want you all to do me a favor, and you can keep chiming in with your whatever it has for breakfast. And if anyone has great ideas on that, I'm totally okay with that. This is a important time for us as a church, and we've been talking about uncommon unity. We've been in the book of Acts. I was meditating on scripture last night and was really kind of thinking about the signs of the times, and and what's happening in our culture, and just all the things that are moving about around us. And so the Lord brought me back to a book that's really important for me. It's helped me to understand ministry in a unique way, and God's heart for ministry in a unique way. And again, all scriptures applicable for us, but for me, it's Corinthians is one of my favorite. Yeah, you have milk in your coffee. You're covered, Jenny. Yes. Anyway, so we're going to be in First Corinthians today. I just want to go over a couple of quick passages. First one's going to be in chapter 3, verses 1 to 8. So go ahead and turn there with me. And as you're doing that, hey, background on Corinthians, on the city of Corinth. It was really a trade commerce city back in the day, and it was a pretty populated, well-populated Greek city with Greek civilization, Greek ties, and a lot of I would say open and unbridled immorality based on what was happening at the time. There's a lot of, if you understand the history of Greece and Greek religion, if you will, there was multiple gods that they worshipped, and not the least of which was one that basically there was a religion, a god that was dedicated to sexual immorality in some sense, in that there was a tie to it connecting prostitution to the religion, if you will. So there was, in the name of religion, there was about 1,000 prostitutes or so in that city at that time, in the name of religion. So as you can understand, unbridled immorality, worship of many gods. So that's the background for that city, which is appropriate for us in this day and age. And especially, hey, if you're visiting us and you don't live in the city of Austin, Austin has grown exponentially, numerically, and that's a good thing. But there's a lot of ground for us to cover in terms of expanding the gospel. There's a lot of different faiths and new age, and a lot of things that are happening around us that give us an opportunity to testify to the one true living God, and that is Jesus Christ, obviously. So that's the background of the letter that Paul is writing to the Corinthian church. And so I always think, because we're dealing with a lot of cultural animosity and division and hurt and prejudice and racism, and I mean, it is just it's pervasive, and it's coming to the surface right now, obviously, as we all know. And so I don't think we as Christians can, if you will, deal with the culture if we don't deal with the house. If our house is not in order, how in the world are we expected to deal with what's happening in the culture and the problems that are going on in the culture? So our house has got to be in order. And so Paul hammered this home in Corinthians in multiple areas. But we are, if you think about it, no matter what kind of culture you live in, but specifically in America, if you will, there's a our life is comprised is a compilation of choices. We make choice after choice, day after day. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are, good or bad. There's all these pithy sayings of like, doesn't matter what your circumstances are, it's how you handle your circumstances. It's the choices you make in your circumstances. So it's lots of pithy sayings around things like that. It's not the destination, it's the journey. So life really is about a compilation of choices. And so we've got a lot of choices to make, and especially as Christians, how important is that, right? And so God wants to deal with any kind of divisions in our church, even if they're low level. So let's look at Corinthians 3:1-8. Let me read this to us. 3:1-8. And it's talking about divisions in the church. And this is Paul writing. Brothers, I could not address you as spiritual, but as worldly, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk and solid food, for you're not ready for it. Indeed, you are still not ready. You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? That's so huge. When he's saying, since there's jealousy and quarreling and fighting going on inside of the church, are we not still worldly? That's a pretty decent rebuke at this church. Are you not acting like mere men? For when one says, and this is key, for one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos. Are you not mere men? What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each. I planted the seed. I planted it. Paul planted the seed. Apollos watered it. But God made it grow. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God can make things grow. The man who plants and the man who waters have one purpose, and each will be recorded to his own labor. That is a choice, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's throughout the history of Christianity. Some people have a preference for one preacher or minister, and another has another preference for one preacher or minister. And as long as they're biblically that like in the same boat, I understand there's a term that says doctrine divides, and it does, because theologians through the ages have never been able to get into the same room and have been able to come out with all in full agreement, and that's okay. But we need to adhere to a strict biblical standard to the best of our ability, but we don't want to air our grievances in public, if you will, like on social media platforms, talking about, well, I favor this person over that person. That's okay. Everybody has preferences. I've been, every church I've been a part of, everybody had their favorite preachers, and that's cool. I like that, and I have my favorite too. But it can't get to a point where we are starting to do things that divide people, that say, hey, wait, no, this person or not this person because of this, right? Or this ministry versus this ministry, or this church versus this church. No. We have got to take care of our house. Our house has got to be in order. We have got to be on the same page and understand that we all play a role. No matter what the preacher is, who the preacher is, who the minister is, as long as they're understanding their role, that's all that really matters. We're going to follow certain leaders. There's a reason that we chose, those of us who call Austin Oaks Church home. There's a reason that we chose this church, and that's it. And that's a good thing. But we can't get into these petty arguments and fights and expect that the world is going to turn to Jesus when they see us arguing over things that really aren't crucial to these choices that we have as it pertains to life and death. So I think it's just like where we need to camp on in this season. It's just, we need to be cautious. Scripture tells us to choose words carefully, measure your steps, be careful what you do. It's not to say that you can't be, you can't be verbal about your faith, but I do think there's something to be said about, picking apart, other churches or other ministries. Again, hear my heart in this. This is really more about, in my heart, my understanding, this is more about advancing the gospel as it is to a choice of who do you prefer as a preacher. Because that's really what it comes down to. This is, because ain't no preacher perfect. Let me shed the light. A friend of mine, who's one of my favorite preachers, he was standing in front of the pulpit and he was talking about an argument he and his wife had on the way to Sunday services, and he just stopped and walked around the pulpit. And he's like, for those that didn't know, this pulpit doesn't protect us from being sinful and having a nature that is sinful. It doesn't, and this guy has a reach of thousands and thousands of people. So I think we have to understand that there is something to be said about it being okay to have a choice and a preference, but not for it to be a dividing factor. All right, I want to move on because I think this will kind of shed a little bit more light too on where I want to go this morning. It's kind of funny because I can hear my son watching cartoons in the background. So I hope you're not all. I don't have a door in this room here, so the only way for me to stop that would be to leave. So I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to trust that my voice, which is typically pretty loud, is overriding the cartoons in the background. One more verse, one more passage for us. Just go back to the beginning of. Oh wait. I had on the wrong passage. We were in Corinthians 3:1-8. Now I want us to go to 1 Corinthians 2:20. Okay, let's read through this real quickly. Don't want to spend a lot of time. Just want us to process and understand that the choices that we make are super important. Right now, we were like I've been looking at even I was reading this article about an NBA player, the National Basketball Association, the pro NBA teams. And there's a gentleman there who's fairly influential and fairly prominent figure in the NBA, a player. And he said, look, he's like, I don't want to necessarily get back to basketball because I think what we're dealing with in this time is so important. And I don't want to I don't know. He's wrestling with the fact, will basketball be a nice reprieve for us, or will it stop the conversation? Because I think really that's where we're at, is conversations need to happen. There needs to be a lot of listening ears. We need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. 1 Corinthians 20 through 23. Let me read this. This is the last passage. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Listen to me on this one. Jews demand miraculous signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. Man, that's huge. That's huge. Here's Paul. He's breaking down something that's really significant. So the Jews of the time were really looking for signs and wonders, culturally speaking, and culturally speaking, the Greeks sought wisdom. And so if you think about those, but he said, hey, we preach Christ crucified, and that's it. And there's enough power and authority in that, and enough to save people, and enough for us to continue to follow God. So here's the thing. If you will, we still have that issue today. Some are seeking signs and wonders, and some are seeking wisdom. And so, some of us will, and again, it's a pendulum. It's a delicate pendulum. Some of us lean more towards, what is God saying? I need a sign, and those are all good things. God, give me a sign. Praying and asking for a sign is good. And some of us are seeking wisdom to the detriment of the other. A God who is alive and well, that we know is alive and well, will move in some facet or form. And we all can testify to that. And that is part of our testimony. It's important to know. So look, so it doesn't matter whether you lean more to the spiritual side, or because we're all spiritual beings, but like that's not the conversation here, but like more of like, hey, I'm looking for a sign and wonder, or let me seek more knowledge. It's about Christ crucified. God makes it very simple for us. We don't want to complicate it any more than we need to, and it is necessary. Look, I'll be the first person. I love discussing theology and doctrine, and all these things they're fun for me. I enjoy that kind of stuff, and it's not bad. But I've got to make sure that my anchor is Christ crucified. My anchor is Christ crucified. He had to be crucified for us. In his sovereign plan, Christ crucified is the most important thing. In the city of Austin, Texas, that we live in today, we are not unlike, if you will, this city here, with open and unbridled immorality, with the worshiping of many different types of gods. It is what it is. It's the city that we live in. This was a major commerce city. Austin, Texas, the last I heard, was the 7th largest tech hub in the entire country. That is huge. From a population size, again, the last I checked, I bet you it's grown. It's probably roughly about I'm trying to remember, the 38th largest city. As far as a viewing audience is, I'm looking at it through my old TV news grid, because I used to be in TV news. As far as the TV viewing audience, it's the 38th largest city. It's grown faster than any other city percentage wise over the past 10 to 15 years, just in the TV viewing audience. So we are a massive tech hub. We have lots of technology here. We have a lot of people coming in from different cultures around this country, even that are bringing cultures from their cities from around this country, and we have open and unbridled immorality in the city, and we know that. You just have to call things out and see them for what they are. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't believe in open and unbridled immorality and the worship of many gods. But I think that if we're actually called here and called to minister in the city, then that's a beautiful thing, because we have an opportunity that many other cities don't have. With the influx of people coming in, however many hundreds it is for every week, there's an influx of people who desperately need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Which brings me back to the point: divisions in the church can't happen. It can't happen. You cannot let things be divisive. If you struggle with something with somebody else's doctrine, hey, that's okay. Have a conversation, but by and large, we need to be united. We need to stand uncommon unity. The reason why we say it's uncommon, because even sadly in the church, in this day and age, at least in this culture in America, the unity is not as strong as I believe it should be. And the elders of this church believe it should be, which is why this is one of the key values at Austin Oaks Church, is uncommon unity. Are we going to have all the answers? No, we're not. But let's get together. Have your preferences. I prefer different preachers too. Don't get me wrong. I have my favorites. Have your preferences. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't let it be to the detriment of advancing the gospel through a unified front. We need to stand in unity, which is why it's so important for us to be transparent and to be authentic in who we are. I mean, I try as hard as I can to be as authentic as I can. I mean, I have my struggles like everyone else. and you don't want to air all of your dirty laundry. That's not being wise, because you do need to guard your heart. But there's something about authenticity and transparency that we've got to be authentic. And I really love that about this church is there's a great measure of authenticity. One of the things that that drew me to this church, and I'll tell you, for me, is many of the folks in Austin Oaks Church, in my experience, are really down to earth, and that's huge. That is not common. That has not been a common experience for me. So let's just keep pressing ahead with that. That's my prayer for you all this week, is that we can be united in Christ. And, some people can still lean more towards, hey, I need a sign from God more often than not. And others can be like, hey, I really need to study theology and doctrine and the history of Christianity. And both of those things are good. But we come together at preaching Christ crucified. Yeah, that's my word. That's my word for today. I hope that was encouraging to you all. I really do. I genuinely do. I'm so grateful for Austin Oaks Church in this season. I'm so grateful that we are a church that's united. And I have a lot of hope for the future for Austin Oaks Church. This church has a rich history, a rich heritage. And we all have this incredible opportunity to carry the baton in this season. And for those of us that are older, get ready to pass the baton. That's where I'm at in my life and my careers. I'm moving into a phase where I have been handed the baton, and now I'm carrying the baton. And I'm not ready to hand it off, but it's getting closer to me handing it off every day. It's getting closer to me fully handing it off. And so that's really one of my leadership principles is, hey, I want leaders to choose and make mistakes, because we learn from our mistakes. David, my favorite person in the entire Bible, because that dude messed up so many times, but he got back up because he trusted in that relationship with Jesus. He had an incredible relationship with God, a beautiful relationship with God. And he understood a principle. That's why David and his mighty men, and he had this principle of leadership that was prevalent in passing off and handing off his leadership and what he understood of God. And so here we are in this season carrying the baton. And I believe one of the things that like we came back to, like, Pastor Brandon was the one that came up with this uncommon unity. And that was prior to all the things that were happening. That to me is not insignificant. Think about that for a second. Honestly, think about that for a second. God dropped this value in Pastor Brandon's heart, uncommon unity, for him to, and for us to navigate through once COVID started. And in the midst of that, this whole cultural divide started happening, and racism started surfacing. The issue of racism started surfacing, and here we are. So I think it's really significant for us, and I don't think it's insignificant. I really want us to make sure that we are aware of what's going on, and let it not be about us and our issues. Christianity is a very other-centered religion. It's not about us when it comes right down to it. It's about what Jesus did for us and what he's doing for us and the work that he's doing in us and around us. Got to be unified in this season. Super important. I can't overstate that enough. I'm just glad to be a part of this church in this season that is willing to press in and handle difficult debates and decisions. But we press on. But I appreciate y'all. Hope you have a great week. God bless you guys.